transfer window is now shut and records once more have been shattered. £835 million was spent by Premier League clubs, in part to a late flurry of last-minute signings. With me to talk over the deadline day deals are IBTimes sports reporters Nick Howson and Tony Mogan. Guys, we'll start off with the major headline signing, that of Radamel Falcao. He was been linked with a few Premier League clubs before yesterday, but this Man United deal seems to have blown all others out of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, 24 hours before it actually happened, I think you would have had got long odds on Falcao joining Manchester United. It's a fascinating deal for a number of reasons. The first one is that where is he actually going to fit in at Manchester United amid the plethora of attacking players. It's fascinating how much money they've spent in trying to return themselves to something like their former glory after last season's disappointment. And clearly, Louis van Gaal has targeted a number of high-profile additions to try and sort of sort that out, rather than actually trying to coach his team through it for this sort of philosophy. He decided to sort of make a major outlay instead. Obviously, Falcao comes with a glittering scoring record. However, an injury history that suggests that there should be some caution with attached to this deal as well. It's well documented that he wanted to go to Real Madrid. That's going to be an interesting balancing act in terms of convincing those United fans sceptical of his decision, that he's actually committed to the cause at Old Trafford as well. And of course, there is also the argument that United have signed yet another player who they don't really need. We talk about the plethora of options. Trying to fit them all in is one thing. The fact that they are understocked in crucial areas, particularly in defence, of which they really haven't properly reinforced after Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic's departures, haven't really properly reinforced that area, or in central midfield, which has really been a problem for the last sort of maybe even a decade, perhaps since Roy Keane's departure. So lots of questions to be answered, but as you say, a very exciting deal to happen on a deadline day that sometimes flatters to deceive.
Louis van Gaal, he spoke about the deal and he said this was one that you just couldn't let go. It was almost as if this option didn't become available yesterday morning, United would have been done and dusted with the acquisition of Daley Blind. He spoke of this player coming in. It really seemed like this is one he could not turn down, which in his image to try and bring the club back to where he wants them to be, it fits into that, what he wants to do. It may not fit into a plan that other United fans may have envisaged for this summer, but he sees that as the way to bring the club back up, which will raise questions, particularly when you counter off the departure of Danny Welbeck and how that fits into how the fans saw the club moving forward this summer. That may not fit into what they saw, but United fans have been crying out now for someone with a bit more of a ruthless streak, let's say, to cut away the deadwood in the squads. They've got that in this man. Might have to be careful of what they wish for, because many will be bemoaning the loss of Danny Welbeck, especially to Arsenal. In essence, they've strengthened their closest rivals to the top four, let's say, in the weakest position possible. On paper, it seems a bit of a peculiar deal, given that Arsenal also refused to sell Thomas Vermaelen to Manchester United. So it's a bit of an odd one, considering how the clubs have operated this summer and, in the long term, what effect it could have for Arsenal.
So if Falcao, Welbeck and Blind were the three major deals to go through on the last day, what were some of the signings that you perhaps expected but in the end didn't materialise?
I mean, given that there had been sort of a weak build-up to the imminent departure of Tom Cleverley, and given the way he's been very much marginalised at Old Trafford, even very early in the season, somewhat surprised to see him go. I think the nature of his stay at Old Trafford is probably the most disappointing part, in that he appears to have turned down a move to Aston Villa because of wage demands, and then Everton, it appears, unfortunately, weren't able to match United's valuation of him. So that's a real disappointment. On this very similar vein, Fabio Borini not being able to join Queen's Park Rangers. Now, I don't necessarily dispute the reasons why Borini wouldn't want to move to QPR, but for it to be wage reasons is slightly disappointing again. Interesting to see how they both get on, because they're going to also get a lot of flack as well, because they sum up what the public perceives as the modern day footballer, don't they? The mercenary, who will happily take the money against wanting to further his own profession. And neither of those two come out of the window with a particularly with their reputation particularly enhanced.
Yeah, they really did have a massive gamble on their own reputations. In Cleverley's case, now we can consider if he perhaps knew that the offer of Everton would be on the table at some point during the day, and the negotiations broke down, and there just wasn't enough time to broker another deal, then there's a slight bit of understanding in that. But on the other side of the coin, a much grimmer reality of what modern football might be perceived as you say, would be the money issue, which can have very little sympathy for a player who's getting no football, which very much might be the case now for him and for Barini. Because of this gamble they've taken, it hasn't worked out for them. If it is as cynically driven as money reasons, then yeah, it would be very difficult for them to get any sympathy from supporters and possibly get a deal in January. So they'll be tainted in that respect now as perhaps thrown away opportunities, and there won't be many takers, especially in January, when clubs will be looking for players who want to come into the club, not for financial reasons, but for reasons to play football, really.
A bit further down the league, there's plenty of smaller Premier League clubs made a host of signings yesterday. Which ones in particular caught your eye, and who do you think's done the best business?
Hull City's activity brought 4 players in. It's certainly eye-catching. Perhaps not because it's the best business that's been done in the window. I question almost all 4 of the deals they've bought in. 3 of them have come from essentially cast-offs from clubs that they're attempting to try and finish higher than. There's probably a reason for that. Gaston Ramirez hasn't had a great time in the Premier League. Mohamed Diarmi has been, so to say, cut aside at West Ham United, albeit a very influential player at his best. And then obviously there's a bit of a gamble here with Abel Hernandez as well. They spent a lot of money on him, basically all the money that they got for Shane Long, and he's going to have to spearhead that goal threat alongside Nikica Jelavic. Again, another cast-off that we've seen from Tottenham in Sandro go to QPR, for sort of a 10 million fee. I think that's a big risk. I think he's really flattered to deceive in the Premier League. I'm not, injury problems aside, I really feel his performances haven't quite matched up to sometimes the reviews he gets, actually, in some ways, because I think there are very few players like him, so therefore he gets a bit more, there's a bit more positive feedback comes his way as well. I guess Southampton as well with Toby Alderweireld. That's a player that was linked with a number of big clubs as well. The likes of Arsenal purportedly wanted him. Interesting that he's gone to Southampton on loan there. That's a very a curious deal, I guess, in some ways. So yeah, I mean, as ever, lots of deals went through, obviously, but finding the good ones there, I mean, I think would be hard pressed to sit here in the in May and go that January that deadline deal that was good.
For a lot of the clubs, if they could secure a deal on deadline day, it would be seen as a bonus, really. For clubs who were there desperately looking to add, there's no way you can look back on the day and think that was good business. Totally agree with Nick in that respect. It was rather peculiar, though. Clubs such as Newcastle, who up until they may have been overtaken now yesterday, but in terms of numbers brought in, they led the way. I think it was 9 players they brought in. But supporters were frustrated that no one else was added yesterday, which is bizarre indictment of how football fans react on transfer deadline day. If there's no business done, it's mission failure sometimes. But when clubs do make careful additions, I saw Nick drawing on Toby Alderweireld now. Very nice piece of business from Southampton in that respect. He was back up to Atletico Madrid last season, back up to perhaps the best back 4 in Europe last season. Perhaps he may have had his eye on a Tottenham or an Arsenal perhaps, but to bring him into a squad that is looking a lot healthier than a lot of people might have given it credit for, let's say 2 months ago when the Exodus was banging action. But additions like that after stellar summer work and a very good thing.
I just touched quickly on that Hatton Ben Arfa deal that you mentioned. I mean, that is the archetypal deadline day deal as far as I'm concerned. A player completely ostracised at his own club. There's infighting there between himself and Alan Pardew. I think there's some of the supporters that are quite happy to have seen him go as well. Certain waistlines have expanded over the last year or so. But yet, it could well all come off. It could score 10 goals in the Premier League this season for Hull City, and they'd stay afloat. So it's a sort of one. It could really go either way, that one, and it kind of sums up all the deals you see on deadline day. Really, they're all a little bit of a gamble, aren't they?
Well, for all our Premier League coverage, go to our website, ibtimes.co.uk/sport.